Have you ever stepped into a crowded room and felt an invisible weight pressing down on you, as if the very air had grown heavier? The voices merge into an indistinct hum, the expectations swirl like an unseen current, and all you want is to retreat, to find silence, to reclaim your space. Society tells us that to be human is to be social. That connection is the key to fulfillment. But what if solitude feels more like home? What if the endless small talk, the performative smiles, and the subtle pressures of fitting in leave you drained rather than enriched? Is it wrong to prefer the quiet over the crowd, the depth over the superficial, the peace of solitude over the noise of forced connection? This isn't about misanthropy. It's about understanding the mismatch between your nature and the demands of social life. The Stoics taught that self-awareness is the foundation of wisdom, that true contentment comes not from meeting others' expectations, but from aligning with your own nature. So let's explore the reasons why you might feel this way, not to judge or change them, but to embrace them with clarity and purpose. Because knowing yourself is the first step toward mastering your life. 1. You are an introvert. There is a quiet strength in solitude, a sanctuary that the world often fails to understand. The stillness, the space, the absence of noise. This is where your mind breathes, where your thoughts expand without constraint. To you, solitude is not a void, but a refuge. Not loneliness, but liberation. It is in these moments of quiet that you feel most like yourself, as if the external world finally loosens its grip, allowing you to exist on your own terms. You do not avoid people out of fear or bitterness. You simply seek depth where others settle for surface. The rhythm of social life often feels rushed, skipping from one shallow exchange to another, never lingering long enough to find meaning. Small talk, pleasantries, conversations that dance around what truly matters. These drain you, leaving you wondering what the purpose of it all is. Why spend your energy on interactions that barely graze the surface of who you are? For you, every social exchange is a transaction, a give and take of energy. But too often, the balance is uneven. You give, but what do you receive? The weight of expectation, the demand to perform, the exhaustion of playing a part in a scene that doesn't feel real. You value connection, not the fleeting kind, but the kind that resonates, that lingers in the mind long after words have been spoken. But such conversations are rare, and in their absence, solitude becomes the more nourishing choice. Yet the world is not built for the quiet ones. Society idolizes extroversion, rewarding those who are loud, gregarious, always present in the center of the room. There is an expectation, sometimes spoken, sometimes implied, that to be seen as normal, you must be outgoing, social, always engaged. If you prefer the background, if you slip away unnoticed, people assume something is wrong. They do not see the vast inner world you carry within you, the thoughts and ideas that stretch endlessly like constellations in the night sky. They do not realize that silence is not emptiness, but fullness, full of contemplation, creativity, and a deeper understanding of life. So you retreat, not because you despise the world, but because you refuse to be consumed by it. You choose to preserve your energy, to cultivate your mind, to engage only in what adds value to your existence. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. The Stoics believed in knowing oneself, in living in accordance with one's nature rather than bending to external pressures. If solitude is where you find clarity, then let it be your guide. If the noise of the world feels overwhelming, then step back with intention, not as an escape, but as a return to your essence, your truth, your peace. And if others misunderstand, let them. The opinions of the crowd have never determined the worth of the individual. 2. Trust issues. Trust is the foundation of every meaningful relationship, yet it is one of the most fragile things a person can hold. Once broken, it is never restored to its original form. It carries the scars of past betrayals, the weight of lessons learned in pain. If you've been betrayed before, by a friend who abandoned you when you needed them most, by a partner who shattered your sense of safety, by a family member who failed to protect you, you know that trust is not something to be given lightly. This isn't about paranoia, it's about survival. When you've been hurt deeply, the world no longer feels as steady beneath your feet. The rules of human connection become unclear, as if the very structure of relationships has been rewritten in a language you can no longer trust. You replay moments in your mind, wondering how you missed the signs, questioning your ability to judge character. The pain of betrayal isn't just in what was done to you, it's in what it makes you doubt about yourself. And so, you hesitate, you retreat, not because you don't desire connection, but because you cannot afford another wound. Every social interaction becomes a calculated risk, a delicate negotiation between your longing for companionship and your need for self-preservation. Trust, after all, requires vulnerability. It requires stepping into the unknown with the hope, not the certainty, that you will be met with honesty. But hope is dangerous when you've seen what people are capable of. You've felt the sting of words twisted and used against you, the emptiness left by someone who once swore loyalty. When the cost of trust feels too high, withdrawal becomes the only rational choice. Yet, trust issues do not merely make you cautious. They sharpen your perception. You notice what others overlook, a hesitation in someone's voice, an inconsistency in their words, a glance that lingers just a second too long. Where others dismiss small warning signs, you take note. The Stoics taught that wisdom comes from experience, and painful experience is the most instructive of all. You've learned, sometimes brutally, that not everyone deserves access to your heart. So you guard it, not out of bitterness, but out of understanding. Still, beneath the armor, there remains a quiet hope, a desire for something real, something safe. The truth is, you don't want to shut the world out entirely. You long for those rare moments of genuine connection, where words are spoken without hidden meaning, where loyalty is proven in actions, not just promises. But the lessons of the past temper that longing. You know now that trust is not a gift. It is a privilege that must be earned. Rebuilding trust is possible, but it is not something to be rushed. It starts with small moments, an act of kindness without expectation, a shared silence that feels comfortable rather than strained. Over time, patterns emerge. People reveal themselves not in their words, but in their consistency. It is through these slow, steady demonstrations of reliability that trust can begin to mend. But until then, there is no shame in protecting yourself. The world may call you guarded, but you are simply careful. And in a world where deception often wears a friendly face, caution is not weakness, it is wisdom. Trust when you are ready, not when others demand it. Because in the end, the only trust worth giving is the trust that has been rightfully earned. 3. Spending time with the wrong people. Not all company is good company, and perhaps that is the most overlooked reason why you prefer solitude. It's not that you dislike being around people, you simply dislike being around the wrong ones. The ones who leave you drained, frustrated, or questioning why you showed up in the first place. The ones who talk endlessly but say nothing of value, who pull you into their orbit only to make you feel invisible, or who see your presence as an audience rather than a conversation. Spending time with such people is not connection, it is emotional labor. You sit across from someone who speaks only of themselves, never once asking about you. You nod politely while they unload their worries, their dramas, their never-ending complaints, as if you were a container for their negativity rather than a person with thoughts of your own. Some of them disguise their jabs as humor, their criticism as concern, leaving you to untangle the hidden insults long after the conversation has ended. And when it happens enough times, you begin to wonder, is it even worth it? Then there are the energy vampires, the ones whose mere presence exhausts you. The constant complainers, the gossipers, the ones who thrive on conflict and drag you into their storms. Every encounter with them feels like stepping into quicksand. The more you engage, the deeper you sink. Their problems become yours. Their negativity lingers in your mind long after they've left. And so, over time, you start retreating. Not out of fear, not out of arrogance, but out of self-respect. The Stoics taught that guarding one's mind is as important as guarding one's body, and allowing the wrong people too much access is an easy way to poison both. It's not just the overtly toxic people you avoid, it's also those who simply don't align with who you are. The friends who insist on loud, chaotic outings when you long for quiet conversation. The colleagues who pressure you into social events that hold no meaning for you. It's not that you resent them, you simply wish they understood that connection does not have to come at the cost of your comfort. True friendship respects differences. It does not demand conformity. Over time, these experiences shape the way you see socializing. It stops feeling like a source of joy and starts feeling like an obligation. A series of interactions that leave you more drained than fulfilled. And so, you choose solitude, not as an escape from humanity, but as a return to yourself. You do not reject people, but rather the unnecessary burdens they sometimes bring. The Stoics believed in the power of choosing one's influences wisely. Just as a poor diet weakens the body, poor company weakens the soul. If being around certain people feels like a constant struggle, a test of endurance rather than a source of nourishment, then the choice is clear. Step away. Not out of cruelty, not out of bitterness, but because your peace is worth protecting. 4. Low self-esteem. Sometimes the struggle isn't with others, it's with yourself. It's not that you dislike people, it's that you fear how they might see you. There's a voice in your mind, subtle yet relentless, whispering that you are not enough, not interesting enough, not confident enough, not worthy enough. You don't say this out loud, of course. Outwardly, you may seem composed, even indifferent. But inside, there's a storm of self-doubt, turning every social interaction into a quiet battle. You analyze your words long after they've been spoken. Did they find you boring? Did they catch that awkward pause? Were they just being polite when they laughed? Every expression, every shift in tone becomes a clue to a mystery that doesn't even exist, a mystery of whether or not you belong. And the more you dwell on these thoughts, the heavier they become, until the mere idea of socializing feels like stepping into a spotlight you never asked for. This hesitation becomes its own prison. The more you withdraw, the more disconnected you feel. And the more disconnected you feel, the harder it becomes to re-enter the world. It's a cycle that feeds itself, making solitude feel safer, not because you truly prefer it, but because it protects you from the discomfort of being seen. But is this protection, or is it self-imposed exile? The Stoics believed that suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our perception of them. The fear of judgment, the anxiety over how others perceive you, these are not truths, only interpretations. And here's the truth. The world is far less focused on you than your mind would have you believe. People are too wrapped up in their own worries, their own insecurities, to scrutinize you the way you fear they do. The awkward laugh you obsessed over, forgotten in seconds. The sentence you stumbled over, hardly worth a second thought to anyone but you. You are not living under a microscope. You are merely caught in the illusion of one. Breaking free from this cycle doesn't mean forcing yourself into constant social situations, nor does it mean silencing your doubts overnight. It begins with a shift in perception. You are not defined by a single conversation, a single interaction, or even a single flaw. The discomfort you feel is not proof of inadequacy. It is simply a growing pain, a challenge to be met with patience and self-compassion. The Stoics taught that the mind is a battlefield, and mastery over it begins with questioning the narratives you accept as truth. So, the next time you hesitate to engage, remind yourself, you are not being judged nearly as much as you think. And even if you are, what of it? The opinions of others hold no power unless you grant it to them. You do not need to be perfect to be worthy of connection. You only need to be present, to allow yourself to exist without constant self-scrutiny. Socializing is not a performance, it is simply life unfolding, and you belong in it just as much as anyone else. 5. Social anxiety. Have you ever felt your chest tighten, your pulse quicken, and your thoughts spiral at the mere idea of walking into a room full of people? Social anxiety is not just shyness intensified. It is an invisible weight, a battle waged entirely in the mind. You tell yourself that everything is fine, that the people around you are not out to judge you. And yet logic is no match for the relentless storm of self-doubt that turns even the most casual encounters into something to dread. It begins long before you arrive. The invitation is extended, and almost immediately, your mind starts its familiar cycle of what-ifs. What if I say something foolish? What if I stand there awkwardly with nothing to contribute? What if I embarrass myself? Even if you do show up, you don't feel present. Instead, you are trapped in self-surveillance mode, analyzing every movement, every word, every shift in the conversation. A pause in dialogue feels suffocating, as if you are personally responsible for filling the silence. A glance in your direction sends your mind spinning. Are they judging me? Did I just say something strange? And when the event finally ends, relief is brief. The real torment begins afterward. The over-analysis, the regret, the feeling that you somehow failed at something that should come naturally to others. Social anxiety makes even the simplest interactions feel like a test you haven't studied for. A casual chat feels like an interrogation. A friendly group setting feels like a performance where everyone else has the script, and you alone are left fumbling for your lines. It is not that you don't want to connect with others. You do. There is a part of you that longs to engage, to be part of the conversation, to share in laughter without feeling like an outsider. But the fear of saying the wrong thing, of being misunderstood, of being exposed in some vague yet terrifying way, turns that longing into a burden too heavy to carry. So you withdraw, not because you dislike people, but because the effort required to be around them feels overwhelming. For many, social anxiety is not something that appears overnight. It is built from past experiences, moments of embarrassment, rejection, or ridicule that linger in the mind long after they have passed. The human brain is wired to remember pain, to learn from discomfort in an attempt to avoid it in the future. A single bad experience, a conversation gone wrong, a moment of public awkwardness can plant the seed of self-doubt, which, if watered over time, grows into full-fledged avoidance. While others brush off social missteps, you carry them like scars, reminders of why it is safer to remain unseen. And so the cycle continues. The more you avoid social situations, the more foreign and intimidating they become. The less you engage, the rustier your social skills feel, reinforcing the belief that you are simply not good at socializing. But here is the truth. The world is not nearly as judgmental as your mind leads you to believe. People are too occupied with their own worries, their own insecurities, to scrutinize your every word or action. The silence you fear, most likely unnoticed. The awkward moment you replay in your mind, forgotten by everyone but you. The Stoics taught that much of our suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our interpretation of them. And social anxiety is, at its core, a perception, a lens that distorts reality, convincing you that every interaction is a high-stakes performance when, in truth, it is merely life unfolding. Breaking free from social anxiety is not about forcing yourself into situations that feel unbearable, nor is it about erasing your fears overnight. It is about gradual exposure, taking small, deliberate steps toward the discomfort rather than running from it. It starts with questioning the inner critic that tells you that you don't belong, with reminding yourself that you are not being judged as harshly as you think, with accepting that awkward moments happen to everyone and that they do not define your worth. It is about practicing self-compassion, recognizing that growth does not happen in grand, dramatic leaps, but in small, consistent efforts. And if the progress is slow, that is okay. Your well-being matters more than any social expectation. The goal is not to become someone you are not, but to make peace with who you are. To step into the world without fear, knowing that you do not have to impress, perform, or be perfect. You only have to be present, and that is enough. So the next time someone questions why you prefer solitude, remember, this is not about rejecting people, it's about choosing yourself. In a world that constantly demands your energy, your time, and your presence, stepping back is not a weakness. It is an act of self-respect. The Stoics believed that true contentment comes from understanding your own nature rather than bending to external pressures. If solitude brings you peace, then let it be your sanctuary, not something you need to explain or justify. But know this. You are not alone in feeling this way. Many walk the same path, questioning where they fit in a world that often feels too loud, too demanding, too draining. Your reasons for seeking solitude are not flaws. They're reflections of your depth, your experiences, and your values. And that is something to be embraced, not corrected. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Do you relate to any of these reasons? Or do you have your own perspective on why socializing feels exhausting? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. If this video resonated with you, give it a like, and if you want more content like this, consider subscribing. And remember, solitude is not the absence of connection. It is the space where true understanding begins. Stay true to yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.